Welcome to the Orange Pew. Welcome to the Orange Pew, a podcast of CLA and its network, and it's a delight to have everybody back. We are moving along in our guests, and one of the things that Doug and I said right from the beginning, we wanted to tell stories, we wanted to learn from each other, and so it should not surprise us now that we have cleared out all of our missionary guests from Israel that we're now starting to tell some CLA stories, and one of the big stories that I want to tell is the story of Rebecca Straforelli. So Rebecca, welcome to the Orange Pew, and literally you are sitting on an orange pew.
I am, and it has been a while since I've sat on. I'm glad that the ones that you've chosen for us to sit on don't have the stains that the other ones used to have. Those were a bit disconcerting to sit on.
Yes, and these are a bit uncomfortable, I am sorry
they're
to say.
a bit
And I have to
lumpy,
say,
bit lumpy.
They are.
Hello and welcome to my co-host. So Sarah Lee is back in the co-pilot chair today, and we're delighted about that too.
Yes.
Welcome.
And thank you, Derrick, for allowing me to be your co-host. But let's be honest, I'm third choice because it should be Doug sitting here, but just that Doug wasn't available. So then I got to come. But
Okay, well, I'm quite happy to see you.
Yeah, and I'm happy
because you're my friend. And
yes.
Well, Doug, Doug is Doug.
Yeah, well, I'm happy it worked out.
He saved
this
all
way.
of his ammunition for the Israel questions.
Okay.
And then
Yes, that's true.
now that we're having a compassionate talk, it's the compassionate pastor who's here. No.
Compassionate, direct pastor.
Yes, very direct, very direct. So on that note, today what we're going to talk about is the journey that Rebecca has been on the last number of years, and it embraces the death of her husband, father to four, and we've just actually, while we're recording this, we're coming through Doug Smith's memorial, and what a life well lived. I mean, I was listening to the eulogies, and it's just amazing. And it was like a reunion of pastors of different churches. Doug was here for 10 years at CLA Langley. But we also have gone through Lent. And I think, if I'm looking at this correctly, we're coming out maybe the week of Easter. And so when I think of Lent, I often think about the Garden of Gethsemane. And, take this cup from me, but not my will, your will be done. So I think there's something in lament that's important in the season of Lent and preparing our hearts for Good Friday. So I'm just delighted that you're here, Rebecca. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you for inviting me to come. And it's interesting whenever I tell my story, it's like you're folding over if you've ever made bread, and I know Sarah Lee makes sourdough bread.
Yes.
And when you're kneading bread and you're folding it over, it just develops, and it develops the gluten, it develops a whole bunch of things, and it's like I feel like that whenever I tell my story, something new kind of pops up from it. And so thank you for inviting me to come and share again.
As the son of a funeral director and a minister, I think doing grief well is really important. And so people are listening. Some people are on YouTube watching. And I just want to say, first of all, I really respect you. I respect the journey that you and your children, because I watched it closely.
Yeah.
Philip was a close friend.
Yeah.
And I think you've done it well. That's why I want to talk about it today. So maybe we'll start with, just tell us a little bit about how you and Philip got married, and tell us a little bit about Philip. And then we'll talk about 2018.
Okay. I met Philip in 1996 at his mom's house.
Oh.
Which was interesting. I had mother-in-law approval from the get-go.
So shout out to Anne Brace.
Shout out to Anne Brace. Yes.
We love Anne.
Yes. I went to her house we used to have dinner for 8s at the church after membership classes.
Oh, cool.
And so I was assigned to go to her house. And
That's a good idea. You should do that. We should do
Yeah.
that.
it was really neat, actually. So I show up at her door. I don't know who they are. I knew one other couple that were there. Actually, Denise and Mark Frolick
Okay.
were there with
Yep.
Clayton, and Clayton works here at the church. He was a baby, and so I show up at her door, and I didn't know that she had been watching me at church because I was back then on the worship team and in the choir, and she had felt that her heart was drawn to me, and she said, "There's the girl for Philip." I
Wow.
didn't know that. So I show up at her
No
door.
pressure.
No pressure. I didn't know this till later. And she goes and tells her husband Dave, like, Philip's girl is here, and he of course laughs and says, "Be quiet," or whatever he may have said, "Settle down," or something like that, right? Because she gets excited, which I love about her. And anyways, before I after dinner, he came home. He was at a wedding, and he came home before I left, and so we met, and you know, we went up the following week. We went up to a young adults retreat together, and long story short, we fell in love quickly, and we got married a year later.
Wow.
Whoa.
And so it was very fast. Yeah.
And we were talking earlier, you're a bit opposite. You and Philip were a bit opposite. You're kind of forthright,
Yes.
like me.
Yes.
And
Formidable.
yeah. and Philip was a little bit quieter.
Yeah. Yeah. He was definitely less outgoing.
Mhm. But when you know, you know.
When you know, you know.
Mhm.
It was just the most uncanny thing. I was almost 27 when I got married. When Christian church, that was old,
Mm.
right? Like 27,
Yeah.
6 years ago. That was old to be 27. But yeah, when you know, you know. So we, what impressed me about him though was he had
Yeah.
lost his dad when he was 17. His
Mm.
dad had died
Okay.
of cancer, and there was a depth of his character that was remarkable to me because of that. Because
Right.
he had wrestled with his faith through that, and came out the other side saying, "I trust you, God."
Right.
And so I say that because it's really important for our story. That foundation of how he had dealt with that was really important for our story. So we, I thought, great, he's lost his dad. We have an immunity card,
Uh-huh.
right? Because somebody's already died of cancer.
Okay.
So we're, not that I didn't think hard things would happen to us, but, it's just a weird thing in our, sometimes in Christianity, we believe that there's immunity cards out there
Yeah.
for the grabbing, right?
Yeah.
Or shields or whatever, but that's not true, right? So we built a life, God blessed us with 4 amazing kids, and life was full. He was on the board, different things. Like we just, we're moving along, feeling like we were moving and doing what God wanted us to do.
And with blessing, I mean, Philip's business had been blessed.
Yeah.
You were very involved at Christian Life Assembly. Philip was smart.
Yeah.
He was very engaged in the kingdom, like he believed in the
Yeah.
gospel and wanted to see it flourish. So, even his memorial, I remember so many people reflecting on his life well lived. So it was
Yeah.
like God was blessing.
Yeah, and he was steady Eddie and a man of integrity.
Yeah.
Like when I think of integrity, when integrity is like you're the same on the inside as you are on the outside, you are the same person no matter what circle of people you find yourself in. Philip was Philip. And people would say, if I had $1 million cash and I needed somebody to hold on to it for me, I would give it to him because I would trust that it would all be there when I needed it back. Like that's just
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was
That's
who he
him.
was,
Yeah.
right? And we were a good pair. Like we always said, we were perfect. We weren't perfect, but we were perfect for each other.
Yeah.
So I kind of pushed him out of his comfort zone in different things, and he supported me. Like he was my biggest cheerleader. Like
Right.
whatever, it was like he was my best friend, which was a gift.
Yeah.
And so then we come along, and he starts getting this headache.
Yeah, so let's move ahead to 2018.
Yeah.
So, because in 2018, everything changed, and it changed quickly,
Yes, it did.
like
Yeah.
on one Sunday.
On one Sunday, he'd been having a headache, and I was mad because I thought it was because he was working too much and he was stressed, and like just take the Tylenol and get rid of this headache. And anyways, so my mom passed away. And the day after her funeral, his headache was so bad that I had to take him to emergency. So we go into emergency, and they do a CT scan right away, and they come back and say, well, we see there's a mass in his head. There's a tumor or something.
Right.
We're on the phone with the neurosurgeon in New West, and we're going to be transferring you there. And it was like the bottom dropped out of my world,
Right.
our world.
Yeah.
And I just looked at him, and we're just like stunned, absolutely stunned. And I said in that moment, I said, God, I said, I'm not going to beg you for any big miracle, because I had seen in the church, in my history, my dad was a pastor. Like I'd seen this, so many people, and I don't know if some may think it was a lack of faith. I'd seen people just beg, like, and lay everything on the line that God had to heal, or he wasn't God.
Right.
And this is where Philip's story with his own dad came in as well. I just said, God, if I'm not going to beg you for any big miracle, but I'm going to look for any size you send my way.
Right.
Any size you send our way, I'm going to be looking.
Right.
And exactly that Sunday, the bottom dropped out of our world, changed drastically, and I'm like, I can't believe this. Like, my oldest was 17, same age as his dad, as his dad when his dad died, and I was like, this can't be happening, right? And it just it took a couple of weeks.
Like within a very short period of time, the doctors communicated to you that it was a very serious and aggressive form of cancer.
Yeah, that was that came after the surgery. So we had a surgery a week later. But through that week, after the surgery, that we found out was something called glioblastoma, which is a death sentence. And that's like, there's cancer and then there's cancer. And this was a death sentence cancer, and it was like a 14 to 16 month survival rate. And right away I was like I went to the worst. And actually that was one of the things, that a piece of advice that gentleman, Gordon McDonald, actually not Gordon McDonald, he's also passed away now of cancer, but he came and he said to me, he says, he says, I'm the type of person where I say, I go to the very end, the very worst possible thing that could happen, and I say, God, are you there with me there? And once I know that, I come back and I live today. And that was like such a profound piece of advice for me, because I went there. I'm like, okay, rather than going, I can't even imagine, I can't think about him dying, I imagined it. Went there, go, I'm going to be a widow. And then I came back and, okay, let's live today. Yeah. We're going to live.
Tell me a little bit about the year and a half or so between diagnosis and the time that Philip died, because you would have experienced many griefs in that period. Like it just doesn't happen on the day that he dies.
No.
You're grieving loss the entire journey.
Yeah. Yeah, you're grieving the loss of all the future, all your dreams ahead, right? And one of the things, once again, that I said at the beginning, Philip's dad's death formed a foundation for some decisions that we made. And we decided to, I remember after being the very first appointment at the oncologist, we called him Dr. Doom and Gloom because he was really honest and direct. We went out for lunch and we just looked at each other and cried, and we went, okay, we're going to choose to live. Mm-hmm. We're going to live until we can't anymore. And so we planned a bunch of trips.
Yes.
One of them we had already planned. We had already planned and booked to go to Uganda that summer. But we planned a bunch of trips just to make some...
And with the family.
With the family. So we took the kids to Uganda. We did a cruise with the kids. We just chose to live, did a lot of things along the way. But it was hard because for me, I was always holding on. In that time, it's this, the way I described it, it's like I was holding on and I had to let go at the same time. Mm-hmm. And it's the only way I feel like I kept my sanity, because I felt like I had 4 young kids. Like Luke was 17. We were 17, 15, 13 and 11 at the time,
Mhm.
and then they were a year older when he died. That's such a huge, impressionable time of life
Mhm.
for them. And trying to hold on to him and the time that we had, keep him engaged in family life,
Mhm.
because he wanted to work, and that was hard because he could, which was a miracle. He had brain cancer, yet he didn't miss a day of work until like about 4 months before he died. So he wanted to work. So there was this grief of like all this underlying grief all the time
Yeah.
for me.
Was there anything that helped you in that period of time? I've heard a metaphor like it's like being at sea, and so you're down in a wave, and then you're up in the wave, and then you're down, and then sometimes you're hit by it, and it just seems like it's rolling all the time. What helped you? What anchored you?
Philip was one thing, just because he was so calm about it all. And family and obviously our faith too, because we realized that we could do everything and do nothing and the results could still be the same. Because sometimes in that treatment phase, you're like it feels like there's so many options to look at. And we could have chased a whole bunch of different things, but to recognize that, okay, God, you're still ultimately in control.
Yeah, he's sovereign.
He's sovereign. We have we're born with an expiry date. And those things were anchoring for us and for me. And what was helpful for me was because I wasn't avoiding, in my mind and heart, I wasn't avoiding thinking about the worst because I had already been there in my mind. It meant I could be present in the moment.
And I would say that would be key. So in watching, and I talk to Philip almost every day.
Yeah.
Watching you, it would be you were in the moment.
Yeah.
And I don't know. In watching Christ, reading the Gospels over and over again, Christ was always in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
He was so connected to the moment. I mean, he would go into the desert. He would go up into the hills. He would pray. There was solitude for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But he was in the moment. And I think one of the big things I saw in you both were you were in the moment. So whether it was him trying to get to a basketball game or him trying to get to a board meeting.
When they conflicted with each other?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Or
Yeah.
even I remember him, rolling into a Scrooge practice
Mm-hmm.
because he wanted to see the Christmas
Yeah.
production.
The dress rehearsal.
Rehearsal, yeah. Just, it seemed like the two of you had embraced life and you were going to ride this thing and you didn't know where it was going to go because you were praying every day for healing, but you were also trusting thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Again, back to the Garden of Gethsemane. You're holding this chalice.
Yes. I'll just correct you. Actually, we weren't praying for his healing. And honestly, there was a multitude of people
Yes.
that were. And we felt our prayer and our goal was to live our life.
Right.
For God to be present in our life, for God to be present in our moments, in the moment, for God to take care of the details and the timing. But I don't think I prayed for God to heal him, because I did pray, thy will be done.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I remember coming to Philip many times and praying, just right now, every cell,
yeah,
every organ, every part of him, strengthen,
yeah,
multiply that which is good,
Yeah.
remove that which is bad. So you're right. There were many people praying. We were also submitted to thy kingdom come.
yeah.
And I want to kind of go then to the end.
Yeah.
You had returned from California.
Yeah.
And it became clear that he wasn't coming home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he moved into hospice.
Yeah.
When I say, like, I'll back up just a second in terms of the little miracles along the way.
Sure.
the miracle of where his tumor grew. He had 2 of them, 2 surgeries. It was on the outside of the brain, so none of his cognitive function was affected
Right.
until the end. The fact that he continued on, we continued to live life, we continued to travel, he wasn't sick. Even like all the things they predicted with related to radiation, he never had. He was a little bit tired, but not like flat out exhausted. His chemo that he was on didn't make him sick the way that we were expecting it to. Like
Right.
there was just so that a miracle was cancer didn't invade our home. Philip had cancer, but it didn't invade our home and take over every aspect of our life, which to me was a miracle.
Right.
And we got to go to Italy.
And we did get to go to Italy, yes.
Because that too, the timing I remember was kind of like, ooh, is this going to work out?
He had a clear MRI. And then we were like, okay, we're good to go.
We can go.
Yeah, we can go.
Yeah, because it was kind of touch and go, like, is this going to work out? And he really wanted to do that. I remember he said to you, Derrick, I never got to go on a missions with you, Derrick, and I wish we could do that. And so we started, planning that.
Yeah.
And it was so great.
It was.
I still look at the pictures and just think that was so awesome.
It was.
And that was all part of living life.
It was part of living life and embracing it, you know?
Which was, I think, which is one of the big important lessons for all of us.
Yeah.
We have so many grains of sand in an hourglass. Each grain is a day, and we need to live them. I mean, really live them without regret and for the kingdom. And he did. Now,
so December
2019.
So we were in California, and we came back, and while we were there, I knew I couldn't care for him at home anymore, and he was going to need to go into hospice, and he was okay with that. We had talked about that, and
but another grief, my goodness.
all the way home, I remember just like we just held each other on the plane. Because it's like we knew he was going to move into hospice, and this was the sort of like the final phase, right? And we just held each other, and he was so brave. And we come home, and we dropped him off at hospice, and you came and met us there, and it was also a little share a story on my youngest. He was just a little boy. He was 12, and we're driving.
I was going to ask about the kids.
We're driving home, and I said to the kids, I just had 2 of them in the car, and I just said, I said, last night was the last time I slept with Dad, that we slept in the same bed. And he says, well, I can crawl into your bed with you, Mom, if you want. And I said, I was hoping you would offer, right? He's still at that age where you just crawl in and lay there and stuff. And it was just so sweet that he did that. He did it for several months. And it was a safety for him. And it was just like I wasn't alone, right?
Yeah. How did the others do?
It was a journey, right? When he was diagnosed, they knew he had brain cancer, but we opted not to tell them the name of it and the fact that it was a death sentence until we felt like there was no more treatment options. And that was purposeful because we didn't want them to, cancer to rule our life, that Dad's dying, that Dad's always dying. And so we didn't tell them until, Luke found out a little bit earlier, and then when our treatment options were over. And grief hits differently at different developmental stages.
Sure.
So that's one thing I've noticed about the kids. So Mason was 12, Amy was 14, Kate was 16, Luke's at 18 at that point, right when we told them. Mason was like, oh, okay. Didn't quite know what it meant that, okay, Dad's going to die. I remember taking them each separately and saying, we don't know how long, probably a few months, 4 or 5 months at that point. Start thinking about saying what you need to say while you have time so that you don't have any regrets. And I remember Kate, that when she clued in right away. She was 16. She said, that means he's not going to be there at my wedding. And I'm like, yeah. And he's not going to be there to hold my babies. I said, yeah.
Yeah.
Short of a miracle, yeah. And so the older two understood the future loss.
Right.
Yeah.
It's taken a little time for the younger to, now they're 16 and 18 or 19 now, and
Yeah.
they now see they're experiencing the future loss of what life, where he's not going to be in their future and where he's not now. And so each during the time, it's just trying to touch on where they're at, trying to provide places for them to talk. We would sit while he was in hospice, and that fall we'd sit in the hot tub and talk and stuff,
Right.
and just talk about the hard things. And then when he was in hospice, then Luke could drive, so he came and visited every day. They came when they could. Their life continued on as well, because we both wanted them to continue on in their sports and their activities, and then they could come and visit him when they could, right?
And in that season, was there a scripture? Did the Spirit of God prepare you? How did you personally journey through that fall?
I wouldn't say that there was a scripture that fall. The scripture that was probably the most meaningful to me was the week that he was in the hospital.
So it was the whole season. God gave you something.
Yeah. So he went into the hospital waiting for his surgery and we got the diagnosis just after Easter in that year. And there was a song that we had heard. It's like 100 billion reasons or something. I can't remember the name of it. It was a Hillsong song. And there was a line in there that came to me while I was in the hospital, having panic attack after panic attack, barely being able to breathe, because I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is happening. Because at that point I had seen the MRI report, and so I knew what they were expecting. And it was yet there's a line that says, you gladly chose surrender, and so do I. And then I remember Jesus in the garden.
Yeah.
And he looked ahead, and like Jesus was in the garden, he looked ahead and he knew that the pain and suffering that was coming his way. He knew that in that moment, and he went, okay, but not my will, but yours. And I realized that I saw ahead, and I knew that the end was not short of a miracle. That there was pain and suffering ahead. I had a nursing background, cancer treatment. I was like already imagining riding the waves of waiting for scans, waiting for all this kind of stuff. And I realized in that moment, actually, Jesus knows what this feels like. And it was probably the first time, like I'd been a Christian for a long time, since I was 5, but it was the first time I could relate, that Jesus could relate. I could relate to Jesus in that he looked ahead and saw and knew, and then chose surrender. And it's like, yeah, if you gladly chose surrender, so can I. Okay, God, I surrender. I surrender to you. I trust you. I don't know what's going to happen, but I still trust you.
One of the powerful things about the incarnation is that Christ suffered.
Yeah.
And thereby identified with our humanness. Yeah. And it's a powerful part of being able to walk with Jesus in those dark moments.
Yeah.
I know that counseling has played a role for you and your kids, and I think that was a good thing, right?
Yeah. When he was first diagnosed with cancer, I sent all the kids to counseling, and I told them that they had to go. There was no option. And so just because I wanted them to have done it once, so that when they needed it, they knew what to expect. So at different points, after when we knew that he had about 4 or 5 months left to live, I said to them as well, make sure you do what you say. And I said, I'm going to be watching. And if I think you need counseling, I'm pulling rank and you're going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, okay. And it wasn't like, do you want to go? Don't you want to go? And so at different points, they've all had some counseling, as have I, along the way. And then I went to Grief Share after he passed away as well.
And I know that you actually went to Grief Share.
Yes.
At another church.
Yes, I did.
But CLA actually has a Grief Share program.
Yeah.
And many people have gone through that. Many people maybe that are listening to this program today don't even know that CLA has a Grief Share program or that the program exists.
Yeah.
But it's a fairly lengthy program in which people who have experienced grief are walking together through a journey.
Yeah. I found it to be a very gentle process, the Grief Share program. It just, it's really low key. And it just, I would say probably for me, it was gentle. It was during COVID. So thankfully it could run, because it was considered, small. It was considered a support group. So it ran. I went at another church, and, one of the things they talk about in grief is the idea of acceptance. And I always thought, well, of course I accept the fact he's dead because he's not here. I get that. But I realized for me, I had to accept all the places in the future where he wasn't going to be either. I had to accept that he was never coming back. And even when I went through grief, and even if I felt like I got to the other side and I did it well, or whatever, it still meant it wasn't like the prize was he's coming back. It meant that I still had to get to the other side and choose to live that life too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And Philip died a week before Christmas, 2019. And then we went into 2020 and we got his memorial. we got to celebrate his life, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to ask you now, I recognize is in the context of COVID.
Yeah.
And that maybe changes things. But I do want to talk to you about what happened after. I want to know how the church did. I want to know what the church did right. I want to know what maybe mistakes, or I don't know if I would call them mistakes, but things that maybe
we could do better.
Yeah, things that we could do better in walking with people through grief. Because, I mean, my goodness, here at CLA, I can't believe how many people, important people, beautiful people, young people have passed away in 2023. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the journey with people and the church.
Yeah. So COVID hit, and I found it was a gift, because after COVID, after his memorial service, people were starting to say, "Oh, let's get together. I'd like to go for coffee. Let's go for a walk. Let's do this." And I'm like, "Oh, sure. Reach out." And then I would be like, "Oh, I don't really want to do anything." I just, it was beautiful, and I know people didn't want to feel like that I felt forgotten, but I was starting to feel overwhelmed.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to do anything. Right. So like the service, and now like it was this flurry of activity, and so I just didn't want to do anything. And so when COVID hit, it was so nice because I didn't have to go anywhere.
Right.
I could stay home. All the kids were home, and so that was a safe place. It was a safe place.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to go to church.
Right.
I could watch it online.
Yeah.
And I could because I couldn't sing. And to walk into the building, and when we did have church again, it was overwhelming when I walked in because of the place. This was where we had worshiped together as a family. Yeah. And I don't sit the same place that we used to sit.
You've changed.
I moved.
Seats.
I just couldn't sit there. Right.
Yeah. I still can find you though on
yes,
Sunday.
I know. I know.
I can see you.
Yeah.
So unpack that a little bit for us. You couldn't sing. What did that mean? What the words? What was that about?
Well, I couldn't sing, and I actually for a full year after he died, I didn't pray either.
Was it anger? Was it disappointment in God? Was it what fueled that?
Probably disappointment. I feel like I didn't have anything to say, and I didn't want to say anything I didn't mean. And I just couldn't, even at dinner, even at the meals at home, I'd get the kids to pray instead of me. And I felt like I would sit there, I have a chair at home, and I would sit and I would read my Bible, or I would read a devotion or whatever. And I'm like, okay, God, you know where I am. I know where you are. And I just knew that he was okay with me not talking to him. Wasn't that my faith was shaken. I knew I was okay. I just couldn't pray.
Yeah.
And I didn't stress over it. And I couldn't sing. I just couldn't sing. It was just too emotional. It's not that I was afraid of emotions. There's days I would say, yeah, I'm in my grief box today. And so I had a playlist that I would play, and I just let it all happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, to get up and worship, probably disappointment. I don't know if it was anger, maybe low key anger, but those are all kind of muddled right in there. But I also wasn't worried about.
You knew that there was a process, you were going through emotions, and you would come out the other side.
I knew I'd come out the other side.
And you were happy when people gave you space.
Yep.
And you said at first it was COVID, and you didn't want to be around people. I want to ask you just a question though.
Yeah.
Later, did you feel lonely? Later, like a year, 2 years, like did you feel on the outs? Like now I could actually have that coffee with that person, or?
Yes and no. The people who were really close to me, they didn't stop. And so I didn't feel neglected by that.
So your extended family, and you come from a big
I come
family.
from a big family. Yeah.
They were there, supportive, and that really helped you.
The thing about COVID, so it was a gift, but then the other thing about COVID was that there's something about seeing people, right? So then when we did start coming back to church, it was like a year later. I think it was like a year later. And it almost felt like maybe people forgot, right?
That he was gone?
Some people, or that it had been so long ago, not that he was gone, but like, it's like, this is because what happens is with grief, the first time you encounter somebody or something that you did together, the first time after they're gone, it's like you grieve again. It's just this connection.
It's like kind of ripping off a scab.
It's like ripping off a scab. Oh, the last time I saw you, he was still alive. Or we were connected last time. Or just those spaces that you go into where you would have gone together. The first time you go there without them, it's like a whole other...
Right, and that would be Christmas.
Yes.
And just every milestone, his birthday, the day of his death.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All those things. So you said, what did you do well? I think I would have to say that people, I feel blessed. Like everyone, there was nobody really who, I wasn't disappointed. Before we started recording, we talked a little bit about what to say, what not to say kind of a thing, right? And I think most importantly is not to talk about, what the testimony you're going to have afterwards is. Because I did have somebody say that to me. Oh, you're going to have a really good testimony afterwards. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want it. Thanks.
I'd rather not have that.
Yeah, you know what? Exactly. Pick somebody else. But that was few and far between. I think mostly it was the like you don't know what to say. It's better to say something than to be silent. And I would help. I often found myself saying, when I would tell people, it's like, and then I go, yeah, I know there's no words. It just sucks. Right. Yeah. And like, oh yeah, because people don't want to say that. People want to have words of hope. Right.
That's right. Yeah.
And you always feel like you have to say something encouraging or something that's hopeful or that it's okay because whatever. And I'd be like, no, it just sucks. There's no way around this.
So one of the things people could do is just acknowledge.
This is hard.
This is hard. This is painful. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
We love you.
Yeah. And they'd say, oh, I can't imagine. I said, yeah, neither can I. But I'm in it. Right? Yeah. I can't imagine it either. I never could have imagined. Right?
I have to.
I don't have a choice. And I'm not saying I can't imagine is a bad thing to say, but I think it's just like wow, this is hard,
It's an authenticity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think sometimes people, they don't know what to say, so then they pull away,
Yeah.
avoid. Oh, there she is. Oh, and
What if I make her cry?
yeah, what if I make her cry? Or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever.
That
just
shouldn't
this,
be.
just
Yeah.
this fear of doing the wrong thing, and they don't want to bring you more pain. So
Yeah.
they don't want to do or say something that could cause you more pain.
And that's exactly, but at the same time, trust me, there's not really anything you could say that would cause me more pain,
Right.
right?
True.
It's
Like you've been
not.
through it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that.
I
It's the
already
pain
have
of
all the pain.
we want people to remember him, right?
Yeah.
So
That
yeah,
was
I
my
remember.
next question, because I think sometimes people think, well, should I mention Philip,
Right.
or would that cause Rebecca to be upset? And so then I find that people tend to avoid
Yeah.
speaking about the person who has passed away when I don't know, I haven't experienced this to the level that you have. But like even with my mom, who's passed away, like I just think, let's talk about her. That brings me joy
Yeah.
to remember and to have a little laugh about something or whatever. And would you say that's true? Like you want people to talk about Philip, not avoid talking about Philip?
Yeah, exactly. So I this. I talk about him all the time with anybody, especially if they knew, or any other people. It's like, oh yeah, well, my husband this or whatever, and I don't avoid the fact that he isn't here.
Yeah. You and I have joked at times about COVID.
Oh, what he
what
would do.
what Philip would have done
What he
as the
would have
church
thought.
was faced with all these calamities.
Yeah.
We're running out of time, but I want to just jump ahead a little bit to singleness.
Okay.
So God actually spoke to you.
He did.
About singleness before Philip died. So tell us that story. And then I want to get into a little bit about what is it like being single. And maybe the church does a poorer job with that than even with grief.
So in January of 2019, so like 11 months before he passed away, I had an opportunity to go to a conference in Florida for work, and it was called Singleness, Family, and Mission, and related to missions, global missions. And while I was there, I didn't really know exactly. I thought, okay, singleness, family, missions, how do we minister to singles in missions, because working for a missions organization at the time. But what they ended up talking about was the theology of singleness, and went through and unpacked God's story for the single person throughout the Bible and highlighting that. And the first night when I realized, I had a panic attack and went, oh my goodness, you're preparing me to be single. God, like I don't want this, right? So I had to kind of breathe my way through. I texted a friend of mine, and we walked through that, and I said, I feel like this is what's happening, is God's preparing me. So then the rest of the weekend I embraced it, and I came home actually, and I shared it with Philip and about how I felt that, okay, God's preparing me to be a widow. And it wasn't going to be the end of the world, and it wasn't the worst thing in the world, that my life wasn't over.
Right.
Because I was a widow, because I would be a me again, not a we. Right?
Right.
And when the two became one, not the one became, when the two went back to being one.
Yeah.
Or whatever, there's that, whatever. We weren't one anymore. I became me.
Yeah.
So whatever. But that, we get it. Yeah. So that it was the separation. Like I was going to be single, and what would that feel like? And so I felt, at the time, it felt awful, but I also felt it was a grace for God to begin to prepare my heart to go, it's okay to be single. My life won't be over. He has plans and purposes that I can do and fulfill a call on my life outside of being a married woman.
And I actually think that could be a whole topic in a podcast, because it's really important to understand the theology of singleness. Singleness is the fastest growing demographic in the church, especially in the urban church. And to embrace it, celebrate it, and allow people to be on mission as single adults is a wonderful thing. So, in a nutshell, how did you embrace that part?
How did I embrace being single? You have no choice.
Right,
In a nutshell. So you just do, but also being able to walk and go, okay, this isn't my ideal, but I am going to be single, and I am going to be walk into whatever doors God opens for me to do.
And he did. You went back.
I got a
you got a
new
master's
career.
degree.
Well, I had one before, but yes,
you entered into teaching at a university.
Yeah, brand new career.
Brand new career.
Yeah, brand new career as an instructor / professor at Trinity Western University. So, and that also gave me that confidence to walk into that. Like, I don't have to, like, I can make this decision. I can move into this new career and and be me. And it's not that I wasn't me with Philip. That's not it at all.
Right.
But when you're married and you know that you shape each other, and then when that shaping force isn't there anymore, then there's other things that you become different in a way. You're the same, but you also change and grow. And I remember you saying that to me one time, Derrick, when I was telling you that the kids were struggling with, well, Mom, if Dad were here, you would never have done or said that, right? And you said, well, that's because you've grown and changed, and they've grown and changed, and it helped me realize, I have, and it's okay.
It's
for
okay
me
to grow and change.
It's okay for me to grow and change. Yeah. I'm allowed.
Yeah.
I don't have to be the same. And oftentimes I'll say that to the kids. I say, well, Dad would never do this, but he's not here, so this is what we're going to do, right? Yeah. And that's okay.
Right.
Yeah, and you changing doesn't dishonor the life that you guys shared together, the oneness that you had.
Yeah.
That it's not dishonored by you growing and changing.
Right.
In new ways.
Yeah.
Like, it's honoring, actually, I think.
Yeah. And but it takes a while to feel released or feel okay to do that. Because it was a bit of a struggle going, well, should I just be the same? Like, should I just be the same as when he was here? But I can't be the same as when he's here. And so I just have to embrace that and go forward in that, right? So,
yeah.
So, singles, widows, people who are in the church walking alone, give us a piece of advice. In a church that's often orientated towards couples or families. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But give us a piece of advice in helping people.
Or how the church can do better.
Oh, that's it. We talked about this at a Sunday a few weeks ago. Well, months. Whenever it was. Yeah, we did talk about that. Well, don't forget, like, singles aren't weird.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes we feel like, even young singles, I think, feel like it's catchy if I hang out with somebody who's older and single, right? Because when you're young, you're always looking forward to getting married. And remember, just because if you hang out with somebody who's older and single, it's not a catchy disease, right? That you're going to catch. But I think it's just we're singles aren't weird, and we embrace them in families. Families, because we want socialization as well. I have a different perspective because I have a family. I have kids, right? But what is nice is, like, having singles come to family events too. I've got friends who say, well, come on over, let's play games together. Even though everyone's a couple, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I can go and be part of that.
You're in our life group.
I'm in your life group.
There are two single people in our life group. And I think maybe that's, like, the most important thing. And is to be able to say to people, invite them. Yeah. Invite them.
Yeah.
Don't forget them.
Yeah.
And allow them to be an integral part of a life group or a journey or a meal or a celebration or whatever.
Yeah.
Because loneliness could be a real issue
Yeah.
for those who are single.
Yeah. It can be. I'm not lonely yet. I imagine maybe one day, because I still have kids at home. Maybe, it will come, but at the same time, life is really full.
Yes.
But I can also imagine, I know that Philip and I were blessed with several couples where both of us were friends.
Yes.
And so those friendships, like, and friendship with you guys, like, those friendships haven't dropped away because either we were friends before Philip and I even met, and then, or whatever. And so those friendships, the ones who he was connected to more so, that's disappeared, and it's okay.
Yes.
Right?
Because it wasn't your
But it wasn't
primary
it wasn't my
friendship.
primary friendship. But the couple friends that we had together, I'm still friends with him, and we still get together, go out for dinner, we still do stuff, which is nice. And then we do talk about how much we miss him being there.
Yeah.
So
Well, I know that on podcasts, sometimes those who host podcasts say to their guest, "Oh, it would be so nice to have you back to talk about this or that." And oftentimes I think they're just trying to end their podcast. But you know what? I actually think that. I think, Rebecca, it would be nice in the future to have you back to talk about singleness. Because it's a huge thing in the church. And that's why you and I did an interview on a Sunday. We were doing I think a relationship series.
Yeah, I think so.
At CLA. And so actually, people, if you're interested, you could find that on the internet. All of our sermons are at the website, or on our YouTube channel, and you could actually find that.
But it's a while back.
It's a while back. Yeah, I don't know exactly what it was. I also, so I was thinking about this, so I thought, what am I going to give our guests at the Orange Pew? So this is what I came up with. So we have chocolate oranges from the Orange Pew. And one is the original chocolate orange, and the other is the dark chocolate orange.
Okay.
And both of those, so which one would you like?
Oh, I like dark chocolate.
You do? Okay.
I knew she was
Here you go.
say
There you
that.
go. So thank you.
Thank you.
For being on the Orange Pew.
The Orange Pew.
And chatting with those.
We didn't get to talk about lament, though.
Well,
we ran out of time.
Lament, I think, is a really important part of Easter, of the Lent season, right?
Yeah.
We have a whole book in the Bible called Lamentations.
Yeah.
And the Psalms over and over again are uncomfortably lament, and so it's right there in front of us. And I think you would say, because I've heard you say it before, it's okay to lament. Let people lament. It's one of the things that maybe the church doesn't do very well.
Yeah. And can I share a story that's right now? So my dad is 92. He was a minister all his life, and he's dying right now. And so he's in a bed, palliative care. He's still all mentally with it, but seeing his body just shut down.
Right.
And so we've, as a family, have been with him, and we've cried tears. And last night I was with him, and I said, "Dad," I said, "this is just awful." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I don't know what to do." Right. I said, "We're just going to lament this."
Right.
He goes, "Yes, we're lamenting this. We're like, this is not where we want. This is not where he wants to be. This is not where we want him to be. He wants to be. He wants to go to heaven, and it's just not happening yet." Right. His body's shutting down, and he's still there. And just in those moments where it's like, yes, we know, grave, where is your victory? Death, where is your sting? I think it's backwards, but it will get there. When he passes, we're going to rejoice because he's in heaven. But right now, this is not, this sucks. Yeah. It's awful for him, right?
Just on lament then.
Yeah.
Acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And
embrace it.
Yeah, embrace
it.
Yeah.
Maybe even read scriptures of lament and be okay. I mean, clearly the psalmists were okay with it.
Yeah.
It's not unspiritual to be sad, to think, oh, this is, terrible, to weep, like, I think it's not unspiritual, and it can actually have a bit of a beauty in it.
And I said to him, I said, "Dad," I said, I said, do you still believe? He said, all of it. And it hasn't been easy for him. He's got Parkinson's. He struggled with some mental health challenges, depression, and outwardly it's looked like, wow, do you still believe? Because he's been miserable, everything like that. He goes, I believe all of it. So it's still tucked in there, but he's lamented for years now, but now in this place. And I was like, wow, what a powerful, I was thinking of Job, and I was thinking of no matter what happens, when he could be saying, okay, this isn't like, God, have you abandoned me? Here I'm laying in this bed. My body's falling apart, and yet I lay here and I can't even move. But no, he says, I still believe all of it. It's like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, the spirituality of lament.
Yeah.
Old Testament
It's
particular.
important.
Yeah.
But Jesus too.
Yeah.
Weeping over Lazarus, and the reality of doing it and being comfortable with it, and being comfortable with other people doing it.
Yeah.
Instead of somehow covering it up like icing
Well, like
sugar.
you said, always having to have that hopeful thing to say instead of just acknowledging the difficulty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've raised two other issues. So singleness was one, but then you raised mental health. That's an important topic that we would love to do.
I got somebody else for you for that.
Yeah.
I know
interview.
who you're thinking of, but we're going to get people on the Orange Pew that can address mental health, and then also, where is God in suffering?
Yeah.
At least, and then single. We got at least 3 more podcasts out of you today.
Well, I don't know.
Well, enjoy the chocolate.
I will. Thank you.
very much for coming in.
Thanks
And
for inviting me.
We really have, again, been touched by your story and learned some best practices as the family of God when we're walking with one another. And there are many in CLA.
Yeah.
Well,
and I want to say thank you to both of you, because we were friends before, right? You know, and it was meaningful to have you as friends, not just our pastor, but as friends walking in it, and knowing that you were weeping with us. That there's people that are weeping with us, right?
Yeah.
And that's been really, really meaningful to me and my family. And the kids are always like, oh, Derrick did a shout out to Dad again today, and oh yeah, Derrick did another shout out to Dad, and like, oh, what was that related to? So it's kind of cute. That's been meaningful to them.
Yeah.
Just that you haven't forgotten, right? And because
of course.
nobody, we don't want to. People's lives we want our lives to mean something, right?
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
So thank you very much, everyone, for coming in and joining us for this podcast. And I hope that those who are part of CLA and who are part of our network enjoyed the testimony and some of the learning in today's journey. And we hope that you join us next time on our next podcast. I know that you'll enjoy our guest and what they have to share.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to The Orange Pew. To stay up to date, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube Podcasts. We'll see you next time.